Hello and an enormous welcome to the Cisco Secure Insights Summit. I'm Hazel Burton and I will be your host for today. So over the next 90 minutes, our team is going to explore with you some really interesting security trends. They all aim to solve common security problems in a simple but hopefully transformational way. Now, we'll be taking your questions live after our presenters have spoken, so do get involved. If you're watching us on the cisco.com website, there is a Q&A panel right there ready for you. You can submit your questions to us throughout the event. If you're watching a stream on social media, all that you need to do is pose your question as a comment, or if you're watching us on Twitter, just use the hashtag SecureX Summit in your tweet and we'll be able to see it. So some of the trends that we'll be taking the microscope to today are SASE, so Secure Access Service Edge, XDR, so Extended Detection and Response, and we'll also be talking to you about how you can take advantage of the power of Cisco SecureX. Now, if you don't know SecureX, it was launched a little over a year ago and was recently recognized by CRN as the hottest cybersecurity product of the year. So during this event, you'll be able to find out why. And if you're not already using it, you do probably already have it, just a case of switching it on. So we have a ton of resources on SecureX ready and waiting for you, including how you can activate it and how you can get a free trial as well if you're completely new to Cisco Secure. So you can find all of that and more on the website cisco.com/go/securex. Now, of course, the trends that I've just mentioned, they're not particularly new. They haven't just emerged. They've been around for a little while. But what we're really seeing is that so much more of you, so our customers and partners, you're really fully exploring, how you can take advantage of them within the uniqueness of the world that we find ourselves in today. And experts have said that as much as a decade's worth of digital transformation has occurred across the IT industry since RSA 2020, so a little over a year ago. So those include SASE, XDR, Zero Trust. They have all accelerated at warp speed. So this session is all about how you can use these trends and how you can solve specific security issues in your organization without adding more products and without adding more complexity. So hopefully after these 90 minutes are over, you'll feel more empowered to go further, faster, and we might as well go full Captain Marvel, stronger with some built-in solutions. You will be very pleased to know that it's not just me that you'll be hearing from. I am joined by an awesome team of security experts, and you'll get to hear from all of them. Firstly, I'd like to introduce Al Huger. Al is the Vice President of Cisco's Secure Platform and Response. He's been in the security industry for over 2 decades and has founded and sold several startup security companies to large organizations, including Cisco, and has created several patents for hunting down malware with cloud-managed threat products. So, Al, welcome to the summit. Thank you so much for being here. How are you doing today?
Yeah, I'm well. It's nice to speak with you again, Hazel. Thanks for having me today.
Brilliant. And secondly, I'd like to welcome Dave Gruber, a Senior Cybersecurity Analyst at Enterprise Strategy Group. Dave specializes in end-user security and has wonderful insights into how these trends affect the workforce. And do check out his white papers if you get the chance. I was reading them earlier today. So Dave will be chatting with Al about SecureX and the larger XDR trend. Welcome, Dave. Thank you for joining us. How are you doing?
I'm doing great today, Hazel. Looking forward to a rich and interactive conversation.
Fantastic. So we'll be chatting with Al and Dave very, very shortly. But first up, we have an exciting panel of experts who'll be diving into all things SASE. So my colleague Meg Diaz, Head of Cloud Security Marketing at Cisco, will be hosting this panel alongside specialists from our cloud security team, Jamie Heary and Rob Castleman. So Meg, welcome to the summit, and I'll hand things over to you.
Excellent. Thanks, Hazel. Thanks very much, everybody, for joining here. So we're going to start off with our panel discussion. And like Hazel was saying, SASE is a major industry trend, or you may look at it as a major buzzword right now. So in the next 20 minutes or so, we're going to unpack it a bit more and talk about what we've been hearing from customers and how Cisco is approaching it. Now, as a quick level set, SASE stands for Secure Access Service Edge. And it was a term that was coined originally by Gartner back in 2019. And it's really all about converging networking and security in the cloud to deliver secure access to everything that users need to get their work done anywhere that they're working. And this is an area that we at Cisco have been working towards for many years. And today I'm excited to be joined by Rob and Jamie, who have both been spending a lot of time with customers, talking to them, understanding how they're approaching it, and sharing how Cisco is. So let's kick things off. So Jamie, let's start with you. So what do you hear most often as the major use cases that are really driving the need for a SASE architecture?
Meg, and thanks. Glad to be here and to talk a little bit about SASE and XDR. We do talk a lot to our customers, and in those conversations, there's two major use cases that are coming about. And they're driven by what's happening in the world, both from a technology perspective as well as the working from home because of the pandemic perspective. So the first use case, which is predominantly the main one that we're talking about now, is a secure remote worker. So when I am a remote worker, how do I make sure that the security that I need my employees to have is there with them, no matter where they are? So one of the things that has also changed is where our applications are. So as was mentioned, because of the times that we live in, the acceleration of cloud apps and SaaS apps has really exploded. And because of that, the applications aren't in the same place they used to be, like back in our data centers. Still, there's still some there, but a lot of them have moved out. So the most efficient path for that remote worker to take is just across the internet. And let's put a security stack right in front of them. And that's what we do at SASE, where we combine both the remote worker experience with the cloud security stack on their journey to that application and make sure they have the same protection they enjoyed, when they were on-prem. The other huge use case is the return to work. So when I come back to the office, since my applications are now in the cloud, I want the most efficient path for the at-work users as well. And that is going to be through that same security cloud stack. And I can get that traffic there efficiently through routing and through SD-WAN to make sure that that path per application is the most optimal that it possibly can be. So at the end of it, Meg, you have one security stack in the cloud for all your users, whether they're on-prem or they're working from home.
Great, Jamie. Thank you. Rob, any other comments to add from your end and what you're seeing?
Sure. And also, very happy to be here today. Spend most of the waking hours of my life thinking about SASE, so glad to do this with all of you here today. Just one other additional thought here, just based on what we're seeing in the market with a lot of our customers, is that it used to be easier to put a number on how many users you had in the office, which locations, and then how many users you were going to have remote. Obviously, those numbers today are pretty much out the window. And so we are seeing a lot more interest in having this ease of mobility and portability of those policies that you would set for a user in the office and a user working from their home or another location. And so I think the great news here is this is actually one of the things that SASE is really great at supporting. So we expect that as more and more businesses bring people back into the office, that by definition means that there's going to be new problems to solve, obviously, as they manage the capacity that they need, both in that office or sort of branch working environment. But we expect that many of those users will remain remote as well. And we need to have that reliable connectivity and security regardless of where those users reside.
Completely agree. Yeah. And when you think about, where we are today, but then when you look ahead, because I think, SASE as an architecture and as a model, I think we're still in the early stages of it. And I mentioned earlier, right, this is an area that Cisco has really been building towards for a number of years. And even if you look at the trends of what's been happening in the market, where you had secure web gateway functionality moving to the cloud, you had other security capabilities like firewall, CASB, consolidating security in the cloud. And then SASE kind of takes it a step further, where you then add networking into the mix too. And when it comes to Cisco's vision for SASE, Rob, can you kind of talk through a little bit of what is Cisco's vision for SASE and where are we going in this space?
Sure. So yeah, maybe I'll start by just explaining, what do we think we mean when we say SASE? What Cisco means is that we want to deliver seamless and secure access to any user, to any application, regardless of where those users or applications may reside. And so today, we expect that many of our customers are going to be deploying this in a stepwise, phased, modular approach, right? That this is going to be very tuned to what infrastructure they have in place today and what are the specific business problems that they need to solve now versus in the future. So this is very much a journey we expect our customers to be taking over time. And so the way we look at it is we have a number of components for SASE that are available right now. Some of our customers are deploying these as effectively standalone solutions, and other customers are actually deploying them together as a complete SASE solution. So what are those? It's SD-WAN, it's remote access, zero trust, cloud security, and then over the top of all of these components is our full stack observability solution as well, which we deliver through Thousand Eyes. So the idea there is that you should be able to identify and remediate any performance anomalies that you see across that network path, regardless of which path that traffic may be taking. So those components are what we are delivering as part of a single offer today. So you can buy all of those as a single solution from Cisco today. But we also expect, and we are hearing this from many of our customers around the world, that they would like to see this offered as a single subscription service. And so we are absolutely delivering that as well. We have a number of pilots that are going on today. And this will be something that Cisco will deliver all these different components through a single cloud-based dashboard. And so we do think that that's very, very important. And this is sort of going to be a turnkey service that'll be even easier to turn on. So I think the important takeaway that we see is that while most of our deployments that we're seeing are this kind of like modular stepwise approach, when we see new greenfield deployments in the future, the chances are that architecture is going to be SASE from the start. And it's going to be much more comprehensive in terms of the way that we pull in all of these different SASE capabilities from day one.
Jamie, anything that you would add to that?
Yeah, just a few things. I mean, Rob covered it really well. And the way we look at our vision is we use a term called the 3 C's. How do we connect our users to the applications? How do we connect devices to the applications that they need as well? The whole IoT aspect of SASE is something that we're building towards as well, to make sure that we can capture not just users and the devices they're on, but what about all the IoT devices? They need just as much protection, sometimes more, than even our user community does. The next C is around control. So we're constantly evolving our controls in the cloud, on the endpoint as well. And then, of course, through XDR to make sure that we get the visibility and we can do the detection and response we need, from a cloud-friendly, ease-of-use way. And then the last C is convergence. Let's converge all the networking, the security together, make it really seamless exercise for the end users as well as IT admins.
Excellent. And Jamie, this next one, we'll also start with you. What's one thing that companies should consider when thinking about their SASE strategy?
Yeah, that's a great one. So, first thing I would say is consider it a journey. It's not a solution that you're going to go off and procure one thing and then you're going to be SASE everywhere. I mean, SASE there's a lot into it. It can be a complex problem. Very similar to Zero Trust, which we've been dealing with for many years now. So break it apart into its pieces that make sense for your business problems. Don't try to tackle the whole thing at once. It's too big for that. So that's why we mentioned the 2 use cases. We have the secure remote worker. And with secure remote worker, there are some things you want to consider, especially the device that user is now using. It's out there by itself. Like out there in the wild, sometimes for the first time. Like your laptop a year ago used to always be in the office. So you need to look at the protection on that. And that's where, XDR comes in, endpoint security comes in, so that we can get to the part where we can connect it and control it, and then converging all of these things together. The other thing to consider is that return to work. Like the applications are in the cloud, so we don't want to backhaul through the normal WAN that we built over the years because it's a bottleneck. You hear users say their bandwidth at home is so much faster than when they go to the office. Like we can eliminate that problem through SASE technology where you have bandwidth locally at all of your sites, but it's still secure. You're not deploying 1,000 security stacks separately because you have 1,000 branches. You're doing it one time and you're doing it all in the cloud. And then by the way, those remote users, the on-prem users, it's the same security stack. So it makes efficiencies, kind of go through the roof.
Rob, what about from your perspective? What's something that companies should consider when thinking about their SASE strategy?
Sure. Well, I would probably just emphasize that you should look to do SASE your way, and what your way may be could be quite different from some of your peers at the event here today. So there really is no one size fits all approach for SASE. Every organization is going to have a different architecture, different business priorities, different investment requirements, and so forth. So I think we look to take all of those different things into account and understand that for some folks, having, let's say, something like Umbrella deployed over the top to support cloud security as a blanket cloud security solution certainly is a great place to start. It's very easy to enable that regardless of what network infrastructure you have. Duo, same thing. It's very easy to deploy Duo over the top of whatever infrastructure you may already have in your environment. However, I think where we see some of the most compelling opportunities is how you integrate that security technology with the network infrastructure that you have. And, I think our position would be you have to go all the way to the device if you really want to think about securing this network effectively, which is why we'll talk just as much about endpoint protection as being a critical component for Zero Trust. It's not just as simple as just deploying a single app and then your job is done. You really need to take a multi-layered approach to thinking about securing the network in a SASE environment. And so I think for that, just thinking through what is most important for you and your business, and how can you take some of those requirements, the so to speak low-hanging fruit, meet those requirements very quickly with a cloud security solution, and then leverage some of those network capabilities that you have. Certainly, if you have a Cisco network, there is a lot we can do to help you manage that identity and policy all the way through your LAN and WAN environment. So that's what I would sort of call out. Look at some of those integrations between the LAN, WAN, and your overlay security, and also all the way down to your endpoint.
Now, you both had kind of mentioned this, a platform approach. And Jamie, what's your perspective on why is it important to take a platform approach and consider XDR as part of your SASE strategy?
Yeah, thanks, Meg. So, security is kind of unique in a lot of ways from other technology areas in that it's grown up around point products. So our customer base and you all have grown up this way where I have a security problem. I go out and I look for the best security widget to solve that problem and I buy that from vendor X. And then I have another security problem and I repeat that process over and over again. And then I look at what I have and our customers tell us they have 50, 60, 70 different security vendors within their network. Well, that's not good enough for this new world that we live in, this cloud first, focus on simplicity, focus on automation world that we have. So we're looking at a platform that now does multiple of those capabilities inside of one platform. That doesn't mean it's one single pane of glass. Like that's not the point. The point is that these things are integrated with each other. So what one widget knows, everybody else knows. Like if I know you're Bob because you just authenticated to my cloud service, well, why don't I tell all of the other security capabilities along the way that, hey, that's Bob. So when he shows up, you'll know he's Bob. You don't have to do it on your own like we do so many times today. And then with XDR is all about detection and response. So if I have a platform approach, I can detect things across all those platforms simultaneously. So if email tells me that Bob just got whacked with a piece of email that was a piece of malware, I can then ask all of the rest of the platform, including third parties, hey, what do you know about this particular file? Have you seen it before? Has it hit somebody else other than Bob? And if it did hit Bob, what else did it do to Bob? So the endpoint might know about that story. The email security might know. The cloud security stack will definitely know. And that XDR SecureX approach makes that all automated. And it gets rid of the swivel chair problem, which we've always had in security and continue to have, which is, yes, I have 50 different products. I have 50 different consoles. And that's all on me as a security operation guy to figure out what is the real story. With XDR, with SecureX, we automate the heck out of that. And it really brings home the power of the platform.
All right, I think we just have time for one more question. So let's talk about, SASE includes a lot of different functions. So how do you guys see companies approach it and where should you actually start? So Rob, let's get your take on this first.
Sure, I'll sort of pick up where I left off on the last question, because what I see probably the majority of our customers coming in a SASE discussion with, they're looking at this from the sort of the perspective of the WAN primarily. And they're looking at how do I secure all of this traffic that we have between our endpoints, regardless of where they may be, and our applications, whether they happen to be in the cloud or in a private data center, what have you. So most of this I see as like starting with the WAN, where most of this sort of functionality and capability resides. But again, what I see is the most compelling opportunity is to bring this all the way down into the access network and think through how do you tie all of this together. And for some customers, they're looking for something simple, something that's easy enough to just enable and then get some of that visibility and reporting to know how are my applications performing? Are there threats I should be concerned about? What should I do to remediate them? That's sort of like one brand of approach. But what I'm also seeing is folks also want to do things their own way. And they may want to even create their own workflow around this. And this is what SecureX is really great at doing, because all of these different components that we have within the Cisco ecosystem are API enabled. So sure, you can build your own custom scripts, and we have lots of customers that have done that today. But SecureX gives you all the capability to do that essentially out of the box and get that visibility end to end from the WAN all the way into your local area network. So I think that's the true power of SecureX, and that's where I think some of the real opportunity is going to be going forward.
Great. And Jamie, how about your perspective on that?
Yeah, so my perspective is that anything you can do to improve the user's experience and the security of your end users and do it quickly, like the quick win. I'm always looking for the quick win and where to start. That's where I focus. That's where I ask our customers to focus too. So things like just lighting up that cloud security stack for users that don't have that kind of protection. Like I said, they're out there on their lonesome. Out on the internet. That's really easy to do, especially if you're already using some of our tools like AnyConnect. It's insanely easy to deploy this. We can also start making sure that they can get to those applications in a more efficient manner. And that's where SD-WAN comes in. So move on from the old legacy WAN where everything's backhauled and move into the direct internet access and give those users an experience that they have like at home. It's just right out the internet, super fast pipes, direct connect, and it's all secure because you have the security stack right in the middle of it. And simplicity, quick win, that's what I focus on first.
Excellent. And I know the three of us could definitely spend a whole day or longer talking about SASE, but that's all the time that we have for today. So want to thank Rob and Jamie for joining me and sharing your insights, and for you and the audience for listening in. And with that, Hazel, I'll turn it back over to you. Thank you.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Meg and Rob and Jamie. I thought that was brilliant. I loved all the advice for Bob and how to help him and the Bob equivalent in your organization, and a real focus on simplicity and integration, which we're going to talk a little bit more about on SecureX with Al very shortly. Now, before I invite Al to join me, just a quick reminder for people who have just joined us that we are going to be taking your live questions at the end of the event. So if you're watching us on cisco.com, just use the Q&A panel that you've got there and put your question into us. If you're watching a stream on social media, just put your question into the comments. Or if you're on Twitter, use the hashtag SecureX Summit in your tweet. So now it is my pleasure to welcome Al Huger to join me for this next section. So anyone who doesn't know Al, he is the Vice President of Cisco's Security Platform and Response. He is a 3-time veteran of launching successful startup companies and selling them to large companies, including Cisco. So we're going to have a chat about several topics that are close to both of our hearts, how to make things even simpler for our customers, how to get a better sense of your security risk posture, and we're going to center this discussion around the Cisco SecureX platform. So Al, thank you so much for joining me today. Can you tell me the origin story for SecureX? What were the security problems that we wanted to solve with this?
Yeah, thanks, Hazel. So Rob and Jamie touched on them when they were speaking, and the reason for that is the problems that we're trying to solve with SecureX aren't new ones. They've been with us since the industry started. I think they're more pressing now because in the world that we operate in security specifically, the cost of failure is profound, and the ability to do your job is really, really complex. One of the reasons is proliferation of products. Things don't work well together, and when we look at this environment, when we step back, if we want to grossly oversimplify some of the challenges that our customers have, you can sort of break them into 3 different areas. One is time. Everything we do when dealing with threat and risk is related to time. When we know we have something in our hands, we have to make some decisions about it. We need to act on it, and we need to be right. And that's a time-bounded condition, and it's not once a day, it's dozens of times a day, it's thousands of times a day, depending on the size of your organization. So time is always your enemy. You're also almost guaranteed to not be in a position where you think you have too many security professionals in your environment. You may have weak or sort of abbreviated ability to do things automatically on a risk-based sort of approach that makes your life tough. So time is one. The other is context. When you have something in your environment that you know about, very often you know about it from a very narrow lens. You have an aperture that you're looking at. It could be your firewall, it could be your endpoint product, and you know that there's a threat, but you miss a great deal of context around it that allows you to make really intelligent decisions about it. So it's like opening a book in the middle of it, reading one paragraph, and then trying to make sense of it without reading what happened before or what comes after. And so, an example would be, if I find a detection anywhere in my environment, and without context, it might look sort of interesting, it might be disinteresting. But if I add context to it, I could find that something I found on my endpoint looks discrete and individual, but when I add context to it around what happened before and what's likely to happen after, I could find that detection is the tip of an iceberg that has 30 other systems in your environment that are impacted. It's been there for 9 months. It's had lateral movement and it has access to all of your critical data. That goes from an event that might be interesting to one that's terrifying. And in that period of time that you discover that, you've got to do something about it, and you need to be able to. So with that context, you also have to be able to perform action once you have enough context. Dealing with that time and the complexity, or the context of it rather, is all burdened by one anchor, and that's complexity. So in order for me to get context, for example, I may have to go to 30 different systems in order to get there. That puts me in a place where the clock's ticking. For me to get a response in action that's comprehensive in my environment that could eliminate risk and block it from happening further, or maybe remediate it. And that's an event that our customers have to work through every second of every day effectively. So when we built SecureX, the idea was, let's build a platform where we can reduce the time that it takes in order for a customer to understand a threat or a risk comprehensively, add the context, remove the complexity to the degree that we can, and allow them to respond to it really quickly. The industry writ large is sort of describing this as XDR, which is sort of a vendor-created acronym that I think is sort of a poor description of a very broad problem that we've faced for literally decades. So SecureX is that. It's a platform that helps our customers, when they're dealing with threat and risk, do it as fast as they possibly can, give them the right context so the decisions they make are the right ones, because a bad decision is as bad as no decision, maybe worse in some cases. Allow them to automate it so they don't always have to do it manually, because as I said, they probably have a fairly abbreviated access to people and the ability to do this, more problems than hands, as it were. So that was the genesis of thinking around SecureX.
Excellent, thank you. Now, if Al is intriguing you into more details around SecureX, we do have a dedicated website for it at cisco.com/go/SecureX. So we're going to just have a look at some of the capabilities within there right now. Al, maybe if I could force you to choose, could you name your top 3 capabilities within SecureX?
So it's always tough to pick the favorite character traits of your children, but in this case, what I think our customers value most in it, what I see the most sort of profound outcomes from, is the ability to take threat data and very, very quickly be able to gather context from it in your environment. So in specific, if you get something in your environment, a detection that you're working with, or even something you've learned from a third party, you can very quickly identify where in your environment it is, or if it isn't, which is even better. And then what it's done while it's been there, and be able to correlate everything in your environment, but also be able to quickly contrast it with all of the data that's available globally about it. The information from blogs that are abroad, the virus totals of the world, reversing labs, et cetera, to help you build that context. And so from that same interface, you can drive change, you can drive control. Any product that we integrate with, our own and others, we allow you to implement response actions as well. So, if I see something, I can act on it. It allows me, it's like I become an octopus. I have hands on every tool in my environment, but only one place to drive them from. The other would be the ability to quickly see from a heads up perspective what's happening in my environment from the products that I'm integrated with. What's shaking in all those environments. It helps me get away from the swivel chair agony that Jamie had described earlier, which is a very real thing. I won't tell you that we solve it entirely, but we go a long way towards making life more comfortable. And last, and these aren't necessarily stack ranked, is the ability to orchestrate. The problems you see, you're going to keep seeing, and allow us to give you a turnkey out of the box solution that operates and allows you to orchestrate complex behaviors amongst your products, not just simply blocking and dropping, but things that are more nuanced than that. Put it through change control, do all the things that you need to do in a real environment, and have it in such a way that you don't have to be a programmer to do it. Because while we do have everything that's API driven, and that's a benefit to the people who have the time and the resources to deal with it, we don't assume that all of our customers do. So we allow you to do it, but we also provide the turnkey out of the box integrations as well.
Excellent. Sorry to ask you to choose between your children, but I thought that was a great answer. Now, this next question is something that we're going to ask Dave to weigh in as well in a little bit. And that is kind of talking about the wider industry. So how does SecureX fit in with Gartner's definition of XDR? How does it fit in with that?
So it matches there. Gartner's description is, from an outcomes perspective, it has to improve protection, detection, and response. It's got to improve operational security productivity from the staff, and it has to lower the total cost of ownership. That is it's dead reckoned to what we do with SecureX.
Fantastic. Let's get a little bit specific as well in terms of scenarios. So I wanted to kind of highlight a scenario and then ask for your insights into how SecureX might respond to that. So let's say a customer's using it and they're likely going to be using a log on an event or an alert, and they've seen that in one of the control points. And that is a starting point to launch an investigation into it. That might be manually or it might be automatically. How does SecureX kick in and help, I guess, let you know the scale of the issue at your organization?
Yeah, so independent of how you arrive there, once you have an event, what SecureX does once you start an investigation of it is it will go and take that piece of data you provided it, or it could be multiple pieces of data, and it will go out and draw a picture from all of the systems that are in your purview, your firewalls, email, web security, endpoints as well, everything that you have under your control, and it brings that into a visual narrative for you. Now, that will paint out everything you know about that particular event. It does it in seconds. And it also allows you to dig deeper. So if you've discovered something from that sort of panorama that you can look at, you can select a file that perhaps you didn't know about in the past, and you can dig right down into it and learn everything you want about it. And not just from us, not just what's in your environment, but also from third parties that you can plug in, intelligence sources, and things that will help you add broader context or more specific context to the situation. Once you've got that together, it's a right-click exercise to start instrumenting controls or kick off automated remediation to orchestration. So it's in its ideal format, it's one place to go and get all of this done in a very short period of time.
Fantastic. The second scenario for you. So that one was the sort of the reactive standpoint. Let's talk more of a proactive stance. So say our customers would like to manually or automatically put some observables into the threat hunting workbench. How can the integrated approach that we offer help them, I guess, assess the possible impact into their environment and respond proactively to threats?
Yeah, so this is a unique feature in the product that maybe I should have made this one of my favorites. But when you're working with SecureX, you don't have to be in the console. You don't have to be in that portal for it to operate for you. We have two different approaches. One is called a ribbon, where we embed a ribbon with all the applications in all of Cisco's products. So you always have SecureX with you. More powerfully, perhaps, is we have a browser plugin that goes with you when you're surfing any web-based interface. So you can be in another system, in your SIEM, for example. You've detected something. We can automatically, through your web browser, pull all of that observable data in instantly, build a case for you, and then kick off an investigation automatically within the SecureX platform. So you can then drive into that response interface, start making notes, if you like, in your case that we've built for you, share it with other analysts, and then drive change, which is also logged from an audit perspective around what you've done, who did it, and when, and allow yourself to get to a very quick resolution. And you don't have to be in one of our products to do it, quite frankly. It could be on a blog on the internet, one of the favorite places you go to do research. You could be in any security product that has a web-based interface, which is all of them, a SIEM, or in our products as well.
Brilliant. So it's the role of automation is really making things even simpler for our customers in that scenario.
Yeah, absolutely. And you can tie all of those behaviors that I just described to actual workflows themselves. You can actually push that data into a workflow. If it's something complex, like you're investigating a phishing email, it can move through a series of actions that you might take. And if you decide a host during that automated process is compromised, for example, you can isolate it. You can delete files. There's a whole panoply of things that you would do in the normal course of events, playbooks, if you like. And you have the ability to both feed data in automatically to drive those courses of action, or you can do it from the workbench itself.
Brilliant. I talk to customers all the time. I know that you have like forums with them, and they help seed your next big idea. Can you talk us through how some of our customers are currently using SecureX and some of the main benefits that they're finding by having this as part of their platform?
So it's used by we have a very large number of customers on the platform today, which is good, which means it's been highly successful. I would say that there's some general themes that are available across all of the customers, one of which is time to discover and remediate have dropped dramatically where they're actually using the system. We see it used 24/7 in SOCs, in large companies. We also see it used very heavily by security organizations that are understaffed and have large problems to solve. And they rely on SecureX to help them shorten those timelines. Also, it gives access to people that aren't necessarily highly trained security professionals, people who are in the industry, but may need some assistance with simplicity. Also, they probably just don't want to spend time on a command line all day in any event. So it helps with that, shortening time for all kinds of actions and tasks, orchestration as well for common threats. I mentioned phishing. That's certainly one of them for sure, is people that have inboxes set up for phishing, potential phishing emails are automatically taken care of by submitting them into the platform. The platform then does everything from detonating the file, pulling the artifact, searching your endpoints, isolating hosts, etc., so that you're not having a really highly valuable human being doing that with every single event that they deal with. So those three, the use cases there all sort of come back to shortening time by adding a lot of context, giving them the right decision-making abilities, and then where required and where appropriate, orchestrating and driving down complexity.
Brilliant. Yeah, giving the gift of time. There's not many gifts that are bigger than that. So thank you for outlining that. Now this maybe ties into the first question I asked about sort of the origin story and the use case for SecureX. But what do you believe is the main impact that SecureX is having on the security industry at large?
I think that it is helping customers focus on things that were to a large degree consuming their time before, that they desperately needed to be applying to other issues. Security teams usually have some very profound issues they need to be focused on, but much of their time is consumed by other things because of the complexity in their environments. And I think that's important in terms of the value it brings our customers. I also think that it's setting a bar. I don't question that this industry is headed in this direction. It has to. We don't have a customer who doesn't have these sorts of problems, and it doesn't really matter how large you are. Ultimately, there needs to be one simple place that customers can go to drive these sorts of outcomes. And I think that this will set the de facto standard. It may be, the moniker may be XDR that's applied to it, but ultimately it's a broader security platform discussion that customers need. And it's not because we want to sell it to them, it's because they have to have it or they can't do their jobs ultimately. You can't continue to pivot between 20 or 30 products. It's untenable unless you're willing to accept the cost of failure, which is all kinds of awful when it happens.
Yeah. And some of our listeners and audience might be wondering, where SecureX sits. How is it different to a SIM or a security orchestration, automation response, or SOAR? How is it different to those two things?
It's easy to conflate the two, three, and confuse them all. So that's I get asked that question a lot by customers, and the industry is going through a transition right now where many of us have SIEMs, and some of us have SOAR. And in many cases, what we find is the people who have SIEMs, for example, are using them for log collection and data storage, and they use them in the event that they must, but they don't necessarily have really robust security practices built on top of them. As where a SOAR is also almost always very complex to use. You need highly skilled teams to be able to deploy and use them, but you need them both. What SecureX does is it actually complements your SIEM, certainly, because it leverages it. It will pull data from your SIEM. We have our own data lake. But we actually leverage our customers as well. All of the main large SIEM vendors that you can think about are ones that we partner heavily with and use their data. We're not a log storage platform. We're a threat and response platform. We need data. We do correlate data. We have the internal data stores. We use a sort of a distributed architecture for that, but we also need your data that you have in your systems. When it comes to SOAR, that's just part of SecureX. We do orchestration as a matter of course because we believe it's important. What we don't believe is that it should be complex, because our customers don't have the wherewithal, and they shouldn't be expected to have the wherewithal to be building all of their own workflows exclusively. They can, absolutely. But we know they have certain problems that we should be able to help them with out of the box. Phishing is an example, insider threat type issues, things that we know can be automated on playbooks that we do for them automatically. So we have SOAR, it's there. It also complements your existing SOAR capabilities. There's no reason that you can't tie them together. We have customers that do. SecureX isn't meant to be a displacement technology. So we're not asking you, nor are we advising you to remove capabilities you have. What we're trying to do is, as like to the Marvel example, is we're adding superpowers to the products that you have by unifying them into one place, rather than an exhaustive new buying cycle where we're asking to tear out technology, because it's unrealistic.
Brilliant. Further, faster,
That's right.
stronger. Love it. Now, I have one more question from myself. I have seen a couple of SecureX questions come in from our audience, so do stick around because I'm going to be asking you those in the Q&A at the end of the session. But my last question is around how can our customers get this? So from a purchasing point of view, how does it work with maybe a single product that they have, and maybe they have a couple of products, maybe they've taken part in the Cisco Secure buying programs. So how does it work from a purchasing point of view?
Yeah, so the good news is that that's very straightforward. If you've purchased a Cisco security product, you are entitled to use SecureX with all of the products that you're licensed to use. You just need to go to the SecureX website and go through the sign-up process and start using it. We have a core belief that this type of platform is mandatory for vendors that have really more than one product on offer, and we do sell a broad category of products. It's like, you must be this tall to ride. You must have that platform in order to provide real security efficacy to your customers. So it isn't a buying discussion. If you've already purchased a product from us, from the security business group here at Cisco, you're good to go. Just go to the website and sign up.
Excellent. Well, thank you, Al. And if anyone would like to hear more about Al's entrepreneurial career and where he gets his ideas from, do subscribe to the Security Stories podcast. I host that, and Al's episode will be out in a couple of days. And you can hear more about this podcast series where I interview some of our key leaders in the security industry. If you just go to cisco.com/go/security stories, or just search for Security Stories in any podcast app. So what we're going to do now is we're going to invite Dave to join us very, very shortly. And I'm going to step out, and yourself, Al, and Dave are going to have a fantastic conversation. Before you do that, I have two very, very quick things to mention. So just a reminder to our audience that we are doing a live Q&A. It's going to be straight after this session. So do get your questions in now. If you can do that in the Q&A panel on the website or on the comments section if you're watching us on social media. And I'll use that website again, so cisco.com/go/SecureX. You'll find information about all the different aspects of SecureX that Al mentioned. And if you are not currently a Cisco customer, you'll also find details of a free trial, so you can get your hands on it. So yeah, cisco.com/go/SecureX is the place to be. And now, without further ado, I will welcome Dave Gruber. Thank you so much for joining us. And Al, I'll pass the ball to you.
All right. Thanks very much, Hazel. Dave, thank you for taking the time to be with us today.
Thrilled to be here, Al.
So this is your bread and butter. You think about our industry for a living. So you obviously have some fairly well-informed opinions. I'm wondering if I can sort of go back through the run of show here and just have you go through some of your thoughts around things that we've touched on. And so if possible, I mean, so I'd like to hit on, we're starting to hear a lot more about XDR and SASE and Zero Trust, and to some degree have been hearing about it since before the COVID. What are some of the key trends that you're seeing that are shifting companies to consider moving to these architectures? Because these could be, in theory, large lift and shifts. So what are the drivers here? What are the trends you're seeing?
Yeah, so we've touched upon a number of them over the course of the conversation today, and both in the panel and your conversation around XDR. Digital transformation, of course, being a major driver for a lot of the architectural shifts that we have. Work from anywhere, certainly, and the remote worker has driven a lot of the Zero Trust, the acceleration at least of Zero Trust, and the desire to bring networking and security together in a more efficient model through the use of SASE architecture, SASE implementations along the way. Of course, beyond the remote worker, can't forget about the ongoing complexity or expansion of the attack surface. So part of the acceleration to digital transformation means that we've accelerated many of our cloud driven initiatives. Certainly app dev is moving at a pace today that we've never seen before. And the cycle times for app dev are crazy fast. Organizations are depending on multiple cloud service providers, and therefore have a more complex environment to support their IoT projects. Although we saw them slow down a little bit during the pandemic, we're starting to see IoT projects pick up faster. So the attack surface is very different for most organizations than it has been in the past. And whenever that happens, whenever the attack surface changes rapidly, we end up with gaps along the way, either security control gaps where people are either learning about or learning to experience and configure and support new security controls along the way, but also from a visibility perspective, much of what you just talked about on the XDR front, as the attack surface expands, so does our visibility needs. And especially with the turn rates that we see in the cloud, we see the need to have that sort of real-time, ready-to-go visibility, and then the ability to see and detect threats and then move fast on them. I'd be remiss if I didn't at least mention the ransomware crisis that's going on in the world. And we so often just talk generally about the threat landscape, but let's just say it. There's a serious ransomware crisis in the world, and every organization fears it. In all of our research, we see that the number one most feared threat for every organization is a ransomware attack. Certainly, it presents some of the biggest risk in shutting down the business operations or taking someone and putting them in a financial risk position that's far greater than some of what we've seen in the past. So it's top of mind for organizations, and so in amongst the pushing the worker to all new places and new infrastructure and work from everywhere, ransomware looms along the way. Couple other areas just to touch upon: convergence. So as a major trend, so convergence is not a new subject. You mentioned it earlier too. Organizations have been focused on trying to simplify this crazy world of just way too many security controls and tools and the environment that we have. And convergence is a broader agenda topic when you think about it, right? You think about SASE, you think about Zero Trust, and you think about XDR, and all of them have an underlying convergence metaphor that's associated with them. As we bring together more data, we're able to see more and do more. As we bring together more workflows, we're able to do things more efficiently and effectively along the way. So this sort of convergence agenda, I think, continues to play a big role through at least these major architectural shifts in the marketplace, and we should just continue to sort of pay attention to that as we go. And of course, finally, you overlay on top of all this stuff the cybersecurity skills shortage along the way. And to your point around XDR, we're looking for ways to do more with the resources that we have and the skill sets that we have along the way for all three of these. Just the one fine point on the end of this, and that is, we're all in a journey. If you're a security professional, if you're a security architect, if you're leading your security organization, these architectural shifts are not an overnight success, as talked about in the SASE panel. It's a journey. Frankly, XDR is a journey too, and so is Zero Trust. And so while every organization tries to embrace the three of these architectural shifts, that in itself adds a fair amount of complexity just to my agenda for the upcoming 12 to 24 to 36 months as I try to build out my infrastructure. So I'm really happy to see the questions that you guys were asking about, like, where do I start? How do I think about this? And depending on who you are, what company you are, what size and maturity of security you have, you're starting from some entirely different place. So your mileage varies as far as where you start, what you get to over the course of time. And it's great to hear you thinking a lot out, especially as you build these solutions, about where do people need to start? Where are they coming from? Because it is a journey all the way.
Yeah, that's it's interesting you bring that up, because that's our customers are very aware of that. When I meet with them, and one of the things that I'm seeing, particularly with XDR, less so with SASE certainly, but with XDR, our customers are jaundiced about the term. They feel as if it's a term that's been foisted on them in industry. They don't really understand, but what they do understand are the outcomes that we're trying to achieve around driving simplicity, all the things you just narrated on, because these are problems they've had since the inception of employment. They're not new. And we find the same thing that you do, which is our customers are they'll have the problems. That's consistent. Along the journey to fix them or address them or consider addressing them is different based on a whole litany of issues, not just around maturity, but around what else is on the plate and what the drivers are for that business, what's important to them, et cetera. So when I think about that, in the industry, I think is starting to discuss platform more frequently. What role do you think a platform actually plays in getting to the beginning or a successful deployment of these architectures that we're sort of discussing?
Yeah, the topic of platform is again not a new subject, and one that many vendors have been tried to bring together their security portfolio under the umbrella of a platform. The context that we often think about when we think about platforms is convergence and simplicity. Certainly, for one, we think about efficacy. Certainly, when security controls are able to communicate with each other and share knowledge, information, and threat information, they should be able to strengthen each other and provide a more robust set of security throughout the environment along the way. Certainly from an integrated visibility standpoint, as a platform comes together, we expect that we would be able to see things more seamlessly, faster, with clarity that we would otherwise have to put together using human intervention versus systematizing the analysis and the approach and workflows and things that are around it. So when it comes to platforms, none of these, anything that I just said is a new idea along the way. And but so the question is, how do we bring this to bear in a way that, to my point at the end of the last conversation around the journey, is the platform sometimes can be scary because it's not a rip and replace world, as you so finely mentioned. It's not easy for someone to say, I'm going to throw out 10 years, 20 years of investments in vendors and solution sets and different things, and I'm going to tear it all out and just dump in one platform and it's all going to be magically better. Because that's not the world we're living in. I've been talking a lot about something I call mini platforms these days, which is it's a step along the way of convergence. Is we know that we have too many tools, and when they don't work together, or if we have to invest in doing that on our own, it's a heavy lift to go through all that integration and architectural work to put all the pieces together. So every time we can reduce some number of tools that are adjacent to each other and consolidate those into platforms. So you may end up running 3 or 4 or 5 mini platforms, which really goes a long way in simplification. And then you might find one of those platforms that continues to offer more and more capabilities. Maybe you phase out one of your other platforms over time. It allows a path, a migration path or a evolution path, I'll say, to get from this horribly complex world that we're in now to a more effective, more efficient set of infrastructure, and take some steps in between as we begin to consolidate. And I'm sure you see that in your customer base as well. I know you do have all Cisco customers, but the more often you see customers that are using Cisco and other vendors' products.
Absolutely. Yeah, I would say in security, that's more common for us. I was thinking about your commentary that it's not new. We've been dealing with it for a long time. I recalled that in 1998, I worked on a product at McAfee called EPO, which was, I think, one of the industry's first shots at building the single pane of glass, the monolithic pane of glass. And I think that limiting it down to a small number of platforms is feasible. It's practical versus a panacea.
Exactly.
Versus the silver bullet, that gives you instant gratification and solves all your problems, which everybody should be very skeptical about the moment they hear about it. So,
right.
So we're going to build that platform, particularly for I guess, to narrow the focus for XDR. If that platform exists, what are the control points that our customers need to be looking at to be included in that platform to be effective?
Well, our research shows that there's a handful of things that people feel are most important. Endpoint anchors the conversation, but sort of equally so does network data, and our data sometimes flips back and forth between those who say that endpoint is sort of the most effective or biggest foundational component versus network. along the way. And some of that, I think, is actually born from the fact that EDR solutions and NDR solutions have been around a while, and people have already learned how to utilize those capabilities for the purposes of investigation and response along the way. Adding other capabilities in the play is newer. In fact, in our last research project we saw cloud actually as the area that most organizations said that they want to start in when they're thinking about an XDR implementation. And at first I thought that surprised me, because I also cover in my endpoint research that EDR is basically a mainstream technology. I expected people would say, I just want to swap out my EDR technology first. But in fact, the data showed instead that organizations have a gap in cloud visibility and cloud detection and response, and therefore want to start there to try to close that gap before they start to think about prioritizing network and endpoint, which many organizations already have solutions in place. So it's not that network and endpoint aren't important in the equation. It was just interesting to see as we asked organizations, like, where do you want to start? It's like, cloud is my focus. That's the runaway train for me right now from a security operations perspective, and I need help there first. But then people did say, on top of that, endpoint, network, email, identity is a big play too that we don't always talk a lot about, but the identity part of the equation is also really, really important too.
Yeah, and I feel like identity is threaded through all of those narratives.
Yes.
Independent of that. When we talk about cloud, what are this is my curiosity has me, that can mean a lot of things. So when they're talking about driving XDR and those assets first, what are they referring to? Is it apps? Is it workloads? Is it access to my SaaS sites that I use on a regular basis? Like, what does that mean?
Yeah, I'm glad you said that, actually, because there's a lot of diversity into what's happening in cloud today. And while most people are focused on the initially workloads, SaaS is a big part of the equation too, because there's a big lack of visibility when, especially over the course of this last year, whether they were formal projects or shadow IT related projects, people engaged in a number of SaaS applications in the marketplace, and they're just off the radar for the security team, both from what's happening and from where our data is. The diversity of where data lives is now sort of rising up in the equation here too. It's as I feel like I'm losing control of where all my data is, because it's scattered across these different cloud infrastructures. It's residing in SaaS applications as well, and of course on now a lot of non-corporate devices along the way. So just lack of visibility to what's happening on a lot of devices and infrastructure that's missing there.
So yeah, and I always feel like we have all these great security controls in place, but once you get to that SaaS application where you ferreted away data that you maybe should or should not have done, then our visibility stops. It's an opaque wall, and it's game on once you're in that application where you have access to critical customer data. And it makes me think that that's an area that definitely needs a great deal of inspection as well.
Yeah, I think so too. And I think, as a provider for you guys, we all need to start thinking about how we're going to provide interfaces and expect that the SaaS providers are going to provide access to the kind of visibility that we need. Because a lot of those solutions, while some of the big SaaS platforms certainly are designed to do so, some of the smaller SaaS applications, that hasn't been a big priority for them.
Yeah, I see that a great deal with customers, and I think that's around the bend for us. And to go back a little bit around the discussion that we've just had around the platform, there's a divergence in what's most important to do extended detection and response. And there's a school of thought that says you must have endpoint. This must be the genesis of all of your detection and response. And then the other side of that equation is, okay, great, but there's extraordinary amounts of data on the network that are highly relevant, and I need those as well. And I often find that the two people who are having that discussion, provided they're not a vendor, are different groups within the company. We have network operations staff who absolutely need the firewall and general ledger data and IPS data, and then you have the people who are doing direct, more pointed threat response, often dealing with incident response, endpoint focused. There's a gap between the two. How would you suggest our customers navigate the answer to that when it comes to endpoint?
Yeah, that's a terrific point, and let me just say, this is a team sport. So So we while each have their own specific objectives and needs in those environments, the overlay of the two paints the broader and
That's right.
paints a picture with clarity along the way. It as you well know, it's not always easy to correlate all that data and to put it together in a meaningful way. And I know you guys have done a lot of work in that space, and you're able to do some things that others haven't been able to do in assembling the pieces between endpoint and network in itself. So when I think about XDR, I do think that those are the right starting points, though, is that leveraging technologies like SecureX who can stitch that data together is a good thing. It's not like you're taking your eyes off the needs of the individual IT and network analysts as well, though. You're still
Exactly.
delivering specific features and capabilities that live there. But this detection and response capability, I know it's primarily focused on the Security Operations Center, but there's a lot of organizations that are smaller. People wear multiple hats,
Absolutely.
and they need to be able to live in the SecureX environment. Some of the demos I've seen you guys show, you're doing quite a nice job in making it approachable for the person that wears multiple hats too.
Yeah, thank you. I think from my perspective, it is a threat is a threat, and where it came from is academic if you can't marry it up and get real context from all the things in your environment. So the narrative that it must be an endpoint, I think, is a bit narrowly focused, or it must be a network device. To your point, it must be all of them, and you must be able to get the right context to drive the right outcomes.
Yeah, it is. It is, because EDR has been around for a while, and you guys have had an EDR offering for a long time too. EDR did perform a good starting point to have visibility beyond the endpoint. I mean, from an endpoint, you can see what network connections and things that were made. It was a great starting point, from my perspective, for the whole driving the detection and response agenda. And I think we all need to pay homage to all of the engineers and visionaries that sort of built the EDR model, because we're now we've taken that model and we built on top of it for the XDR model, and then you guys have taken it to a whole new level by tying especially the response actions directly back to the individual security controls. And that, by the way, that's the part that doesn't always get talked a lot about in the broader XDR conversation. So much focus is on bringing data together and being able to see new incidents among a sea of alerts. But the ability to actually take automated and or proactive human-assisted response directly back to the controls as part of the XDR story is, in my mind, is a critical capability.
Yeah, I agree. It's an outcome. At the end of the day, that's what our customers are need to get done, and sort of all the stitching that takes place there is only in service of allowing them to do that.
Exactly.
So at the end of the day, what are the top outcomes that our customers are trying to achieve here when we look past this conversation? What are their outcomes they need to get to?
Yeah, foundationally, it's an efficacy story, right? So what we heard in our most recent research, which was just a few months ago here, was that organizations feel like they're struggling to keep up with the level of advanced attacks that are happening, and that no longer can they depend on any individual silos of detection and response capabilities to be able to fight the adversary here. So the number one priority on agenda for this XDR conversation, and thus the driver, I think, behind SecureX has to be efficacy. But the efficiency piece of the equation, that this convergence or reduction in complexity, is also a high order bit in the equation. It doesn't rank as high as like get me past being able to keep up with this advanced threat landscape. But then efficiency plays a really critical role. And then finally, the third piece that's totally important in this whole picture is agility. There's so much that's in motion right now. The ground is moving underneath many of the security operations team. The infrastructure is changing. Every day they're learning about something new that got spun up in some new cloud or some new SaaS service that's on the way. So this environment has to provide the agility for security teams to keep up with the pace of business.
Yeah. Okay. Absolutely. I completely concur with that. I suspect that everybody who's joined us today also feels that's the case. So Dave, anything you'd like to finish out with relative to your thoughts in the space?
Well, just one thing I think that would be helpful for everybody to sort of hear, because there's so much noise, and you brought this up, this conversation around XDR. Everybody has one, right? Like so. But you guys are looking at this equation differently. You didn't go, oh, this XDR thing, that looks cool, I think I should do some of that. You are already on this journey. You're already on this agenda, and I like the fact that you said, sure, I'm going to paraphrase you, but you said, you sort of said, sure, we do this XDR thing, but that's not the essence of what we do. The focus here, right, is to leverage the data and the control points that we have to achieve very specific outcomes around time, around context, and complexity. And I think at the end of the day, we all need to stay focused on what the outcomes we're going after here, because virtually every security vendor in motion today is going to claim either I have an XDR offering, I participate in an XDR offering,
Sure.
or I can solve a piece of the XDR equation. Stay focused on the outcomes.
Yeah, well, thanks very much, Dave. That was very illuminating for me. Hazel, I think we're back into the swing of things.
Absolutely, yeah. And just to echo your thoughts there, I thought that was an incredibly illuminating conversation. Thank you so much, Dave, for joining us and positioning things really clearly for our audience. It's super, super helpful. So what we're going to do now is we're going to go over to our live audience questions. Now, there's been some fantastic ones coming through. We've got another maybe 10 minutes, maybe just over. So there's still time to get those in. And I'm going to kick off with a question I think this is for Meg and for Jamie, because it's about SASE. How can a small business get started with SASE? Meg and Jamie, maybe you can jump in on that one.
Sure, I'll take a first pass, and Jamie, feel free to chime in and give your take. I think it depends a little bit on your use case, right? So if you want to start by consolidating security in the cloud, that's where Cisco Umbrella can be a great place to start. Duo can also be a great way to start with zero trust access. Or if you're looking at SD-WAN, Meraki MX could be a good way to go. And like we had talked about a bit in our panel, our plan is really to bring all of this together into a single subscription service. But these are just some examples of how you could get started now.
I would agree with you, Meg, that especially if you have a remote site or 2 or 3 as a small, medium business, just setting up that IPsec tunnel to the cloud security stack and then using that cloud security stack will add benefits. It'll probably add some capabilities you might not have already. And it'll provide those to you in a way that's really easy and simple to manage. So I'd recommend that too.
Brilliant. We've had a couple of questions along this line for SecureX, so I'm going to try and combine them. Can SecureX work with third-party vendors, and what's the best approach to aggregating third-party APIs into SecureX?
Oh, well, so for the first question, yeah, absolutely. We work with third-party vendors. There's actually a couple dozen of them at least that are on the roster right now that are available to go inside the product, and more coming as every quarter we continue to release them. We believe you have to have an open platform to operate for our customers. So we also have APIs. So should you have the wherewithal, the desire to do it, you can integrate any product that's API focused. And that's something that actually we've seen really a reasonably large number of our customers actually do. I have to be totally honest, I'm not sure what it means by API aggregation in the platform, but I will say that our APIs themselves are well documented and exposed, and should be easy to work with for third parties that want to integrate into them.
Fantastic. I've had a question which I can answer. So do you accept students for training courses that are required from universities? So if you take a look at our Learning at Cisco network, there's a ton of resources on there for you. So that website is learningnetwork.cisco.com. There's some information on some study groups, information about our networking academy. There's actually a couple of free cybersecurity training courses on there, let you know the basics or when you're ready to get leveled up on that. So yeah, anyone who is interested in training materials, check out our Learning at Cisco network. And yeah, I hope you'll join us to fight the good fight very, very shortly. Right. I promise you, I didn't come up with this question. It's not a planted question from me. But they said, I noticed some of you are superhero fans. What would you, now I've got an answer for this, but maybe quite a few of you can come in on this. Maybe I'll go to Al first. What would you say SecureX is most like from a superhero point of view? So when this came in, I started thinking about Black Widow, because I'm thinking about that scene in the Avengers where she's on the chair, she's tied up, and there are these adversaries around her, and they think that they're in control of her, but actually she's been in control all along, and she does these like several moves where she just kind of like hits someone from behind and things like that. That's just kind of a really proactive way of dealing with an adversary. So that would be mine. But Al, any superheroes that you can think of that SecureX might be have a big affinity to?
Oh, wow. I have no idea. I mean, I guess like the Transformers, I can do a little bit of everything. I really don't know. I can tell you my favorite superhero is Storm because I used to read the X-Men religiously when I was a kid, but I'm having trouble assigning just one. Just one. Maybe it's all of the X-Men for SecureX.
Yeah. All of the X-Men, and they're probably going to be joining the Avengers soon. So we've got the whole MCU in there.
That's
so
right.
yeah,
Right.
absolutely. Any other superhero fans, or shall I go on to the next question? That's okay. So let's see. Sorry, I'm going to stick with you because it's another SecureX question. How does SecureX fit in with my existing security operations that also includes a SIEM?
So it should complement it. I'd have to look more at the environment that you have, but the design for the system and the intent is not to displace what you have. So if you have playbooks in your existing environment, you should be able to link them in to SecureX through orchestration. Absolutely. It also can export data to you, in a way that you could make it part of your existing infrastructure and plays. It largely depends on what you have deployed today, but I can tell you that the design is such that our hope is that it complements what you have and vice versa, that it becomes sort of an ecosystem of plenty when you deploy it.
Yeah, I could also add on to what Al said, is that with a SIM, you have a log repository, but not a lot of context. So with simple one click, like Al talked about that browser plugin, and we have plugins with all the major SIMs as well. You can go from one log message that says, hey, this IPS fired an alert, to understanding what a whole platform, all the third parties know, the context they know about that one line item in your log. So it's pretty awesome. And like Al said, it's an augmentation and works seamlessly together with SIM.
If I can add one comment there too, in our research, it said that organizations are thinking about what use cases they can reassign from their SIM platform into their XDR platform. And so when you think about a SIM actually is used for a number of different things. And in this particular case, as we're thinking about specifically around threat detection and investigation capabilities, we're thinking about reassigning that particular use case from potentially a SIM environment with some other custom tools built on, and then shifting that over to the SecureX or the XDR environment that's there along the way. Some threat hunting capabilities might also get shifted over, yet other use cases will continue to live on the SIM. So it's, in my mind, it's more of a question about, think about your use cases, think about where they best fit, and then apply those accordingly.
Yeah.
Dave, I'll ask you to stay on for this one, because someone has asked, what does the future of the endpoint security market look like in the next 12 months? So where are we heading in the next 12 months with endpoint?
So much of it has to do with this conversation around platforms. As endpoints become more integrated with the rest of the environments, we need to make sure that they can interact with identity and access systems, that they can interact with SASE systems as well, because those integrations become informative in both directions to what's happening in the endpoint. It allows the endpoint to do things it couldn't do with new insights, and then it allows the other control points, once they have visibility into potentially an endpoint is compromised, the identity and access can shut down application access from that, or shut down lateral movement and things along the way. So the agenda is squarely around integrating that into the rest of the security infrastructure in support of some of these other major architectural shifts along the way. I will say that there's sort of other important topics. Supporting corporate IoT initiatives has been an important agenda topic for many. Some endpoint platforms are embracing it. Some are pushing it toward other custom or purpose-built IoT platforms. And then on the OT side of the house, there's some that are sort of focusing there as well.
Excellent. Right, I think time for just one more question, and that question is for Al, I think. How much does SecureX cost?
If you've purchased a Cisco product, if it's from security, it does not. You're already entitled to use it. SecureX is part and parcel with all of our security products today.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much. That's all we've got time for today for our Cisco Secure Insights Summit. Thank you so much for joining us. A couple of things to leave you with. So if you go to cisco.com/go/SecureX, you'll find some fantastic resources on how to get SecureX activated and how to make it work best for your organization. Of course, we have Cisco experts on hand as well. So just drop us a chat, give us a call, and we'll be very, very glad to take you through that. If you are brand new to Cisco Secure, we also have details of a free trial. So do check that out. In the meantime, I would like to thank all of my guests. So Meg, to Jamie, to Rob, to Al, and to Dave. Thank you so much for joining us. Thank you for watching, and we will see you again very soon. Take care.
Take action is a big part of my upbringing. I think a lot of that comes from being a first responder family, and when others are running out to safety, my family was always running in. In 2011, St. Baldrick's found me. The St. Baldrick's Foundation started with a bunch of first responders, and it kind of became a challenge between